Welcome to Realizing Resilience, a podcast from the Connecticut Women's Consortium. We're not behavioral health professionals, but we're your gateway to real conversations with the experts. Each episode, we'll delve into the vast landscape of mental health, from personal stories to expert insights. Together, we'll bridge the gap between clinical expertise and personal experiences, connecting with diverse voices and perspectives. Join us for insightful conversations that demystify the world of mental health.
Sara Merrick-Albano, C-IAYT, is a yoga therapist who specializes in complex trauma, autoimmune conditions, and chronic pain. She's able to adapt yoga practices for complex co-occurring medical conditions, including mental health conditions, ensuring personalized care for each client to effectively manage symptoms. Sara provides a supportive and compassionate space for her clients to engage with the transformative felt experience that aligns with their goals. She sees clients via telehealth and in Watertown and Trumbull. Welcome back to Realizing Resilience. My name is Alana.
And I'm Marisa.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Sara Merrick-Albano. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off, what first drew you to using yoga therapy as a modality to work with anxiety and depression? And was there a moment along that journey or your journey through yoga therapy where you realized that it could be effective in tandem with or on top of talk therapy?
Yeah, so honestly, initially, I didn't really think that I was going to be working in mental health at all. I always had an interest in movement and functional movement and chronic pain. And so that was really where I thought I would be, just more on the movement side. And, I did a lot of training and I learned a lot about mental health. And as I started working with chronic pain clients, it became very clear that chronic pain is not just a physical condition, right? There's a whole mental health side to it. Chronic pain is not only in the body, it's also in the brain, and mental health will affect that. And so I also, at the same time, had teamed up with Christine Saari, who's my business partner. We founded Yoga Therapy Associates together. And Christine's focus was always on mental health. And so I was kind of seeing this work that she was doing with her clients more on the mental health side. And I was seeing that, okay, these practices are really working. And they're also working with my clients, both on the mental health side and to help them with their chronic pain symptoms. And so I really started to go more into kind of the more holistic direction of chronic pain work. And so with anxiety and depression, right, that shows up in chronic pain. It also shows up standalone. It also shows up as, part of many other conditions, in particular trauma, right? So there's this mind-body aspect that yoga therapy works really well with. Yoga therapy is kind of at this convergence of physical health and mental health, and then also lifestyle. And so I think often we think about mind-body interventions as the thoughts affecting the body, but it's this two-way conversation, right? It's this loop. It's the body affecting the mind affecting the body. And so these practices can really help to bring awareness to that conversation, right, within ourselves, like what's really going on in my body and how is that affecting my mind? What's going on in my mind? How is that affecting my body? And so it was kind of through that work that I got more into the mental health side of yoga therapy for anxiety and depression.
I was just thinking about that recently too, the chronic pain thing, where I feel like there's so much discourse about long COVID and what symptoms people are experiencing and how it's a condition that a lot of healthcare professionals don't entirely understand, but also just so tandem with if you are physically disabled to the point that you can't socialize, you can't go out, or doing those things impacts you so negatively, obviously your mental health is going to suffer.
Yeah, and long COVID has a lot in common with chronic pain. The mental health side of it, I think, often gets overlooked, especially in the medical community, just because it's, they're viewed as these separate things when really they are very much together, very much the same.
And within your work, trauma-informed care is often really emphasized. What makes yoga therapy practice trauma-informed, and especially for clients navigating through anxiety and depression and things like that?
So our whole organization is trauma-informed. We take a trauma-informed approach with really all of our clients and also in our business. And so what that really means is that we recognize that everyone has a very diverse set of experiences. And, yoga teaches us that all experiences have some sort of impact on us, but those experiences don't necessarily have to cause suffering. And so we recognize that, some people have had experiences that are causing suffering, and that suffering is translating to present day. Likewise, some people have had experiences that, as an outsider, I may say, oh, that must have been a really horrific, traumatic experience. But for them, it wasn't. It didn't cause any suffering. So recognizing that everyone's personal experiences are valid, that's really a big part of this work. And reminding clients that they have control and they have agency over the process and over the work. We explain our strategy, right? We're usually not just kind of surprising clients and saying, hey, we're going to do this breathing practice and this physical practice. Let's go, right? It's collaborative. It's getting their buy-in, right? They're the ones who are going to be practicing, and they're the ones who are going to be doing the work ultimately. And we want to make sure that it's very clear to them as to why we're suggesting these things. And hey, does that work for you? Another part about yoga therapy is that, right, we're teaching practices, these skills. And this can be an inherently very empowering process for people. They kind of learn that they have some sort of agency or some sort of control over their symptoms, over their quality of life. And while health conditions or disease states may change, they may fluctuate, they may feel out of control, oftentimes people like the yoga therapy practices because there's something that they can do. And so this is inherently empowering, inherently trauma informed, right? It's helping restore for people that sense of control over themselves.
And so you mentioned that you work a lot with Christine Saari, that you own this business together, and you guys are doing yoga for depression in September. So within that training, you're going to talk a lot about nervous system regulation and chronic inflammation. How do those things show up in depression, and how can yoga therapy help address them?
Great question. So I think I'll start with the nervous system side. So when we say nervous system regulation, we're talking about this ability to easily go between parasympathetic nervous system dominance, the rest and digest state, and then into sympathetic dominance, the activated fight or flight state, and then back into parasympathetic dominance. So it's, this state of very easily moving between nervous system states. And what happens with chronic stress, and I would kind of argue our culture and our society, this is pretty rampant, right, is that we get stuck in sympathetic. And it becomes a lot harder to relax. It becomes a lot more challenging. And even when conditions are ripe for relaxation, right? Maybe like it's the end of the day or it's the weekend and everything is good. You're just chilling on the couch, watching TV or hanging out outside. It still can be very hard to relax, right? Maybe your mind is still racing. You're thinking about work. You're thinking about, some stressors that you have in your life. And so that is basically emblematic of sympathetic dominance, of being stuck in fight or flight. And so with depression is actually characterized by sympathetic dominance. They have done lots of studies where major depressive disorder with depressive symptoms have the biomarkers for sympathetic dominance. And so with the yoga therapy practices that we're teaching in that course, we may say, oh, well, we have to just bring them into parasympathetic, right? We have to kind of give them practices that are going to relax them. But with depression, it doesn't always work that way. It's almost like we're stuck in sympathetic, but the body or the system doesn't really recognize that. Like it's unable to feel it because it feels like homeostasis, like that becomes the new normal. It's similar to like muscle tension. So you have like chronic neck tension and you sit at your computer all day and you're always hunched over. You may not really know that your muscles are tense, but if sometimes in a yoga class at the beginning, a yoga teacher will be like, oh, squeeze your shoulders up towards your ears and make yourself really tense and then let it all go. And it's not until you push yourself further into tension that you're able to release, right? Or even able to recognize like, oh man, I was really holding a lot of stress there. I was holding my day there. It's similar on the nervous system side. So with depression, you kind of have to like push people further into sympathetic. And that's where we talk about these activation practices that are a little bit more engaging, uplifting, breath work that is intentionally trying to bring people more into the sympathetic state. And then it's kind of like breaks the homeostasis of their system. And so then they're like, oh, I'm feeling something. And then from there, we're able to teach them how to access the parasympathetic states through other practices for, that are more down regulating, like breath work with longer exhales or more, kind of relaxing practices. So that's on the nervous system side. On the inflammation side, depression has also been shown through research to be, again, the biomarkers for inflammation come up for systemic inflammation, in particular, the pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and interleukin-6. And so yoga has also been shown to reduce chronic inflammation, chronic systemic inflammation. And so we do talk about that in the training, and we kind of explain how these practices help to essentially reduce stress, right? It's just that first we kind of have to stress the system out a little bit more before we relax them in order to regulate the stress hormone system, the HPA axis, and reduce cortisol. So that way those pro-inflammatory markers can start to reduce. So I guess to summarize, it's a lot of stress reduction, big focus on stress reduction.
Which a lot of people can use.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You had mentioned how sometimes you do more activating activities with some of your clients, and then other times you do more kind of energizing. And so with someone with persistent depression, how do you make that decision of when we should do activating and when we should do kind of calming? And then how would you kind of help other clinicians make that decision or that choice as well?
Yeah, sure. So in the training, we guide people through kind of this process, or we teach people how to guide people through this process of activation, reconnection, and then remission. So pretty much, especially with persistent depression or treatment-resistant depression, they're going to be very stuck in sympathetic. And so pretty much for all depression, there needs to be some sort of activating practice, something that pushes them further into sympathetic dominance. And then where things get individualized is, okay, now that people are feeling stuff, now that, systems are activated, are anxiety symptoms starting to come up, right? Like, are thoughts, starting to race? Like, are we too far into sympathetic? It's kind of this delicate balance between getting things moving, but we don't want them moving too much where they kind of go haywire, right? And so it's looking for basically helping clinicians figure out how to look for symptoms where then it's time to put them into this remission stage of down-regulating their nervous system, giving them more grounding practices, more down-regulating practices for relaxation.
I mean, obviously it makes sense where if someone is in a depressive state, you want to activate them out of that depressive state. But it's stupid that I didn't think about this, because that's like what I experienced is my anxiety kind of like led to my depression. So there is almost this seesaw effect with a lot of things where I would leave a depressive state and then like immediately enter a super heightened panic state. So I think that's so important to think about, making sure that you're activating enough to remove the person from that low place, but then not so much that it then sends them into panic territory.
Exactly. Yeah. Anxiety and depression are from the nervous system side. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both characterized by sympathetic dominance. And sometimes we think like, oh, depression, nothing, it seems like people are stuck, right? There's inertia, there's, not much going on. We think, oh, maybe they're in a freeze state, or maybe it's like overly active parasympathetic. But that's not the case. That's not what the research shows. And I think it's something like half of adults have anxiety and depression, but most of the interventions only address one or the other. Yoga therapy is unique in that we can kind of take the whole picture and be able to recognize, oh, maybe you need more down-regulating practices, right? Or maybe those stimulating practices are too much right now.
So speaking of the whole person, the whole thing, how do you see yoga therapists and then other care team members, whether it be someone psychiatrist or talk therapist, working together, whether that's like in direct communication or just as a system of care to support clients more effectively beyond just what people will learn in this training?
Yeah, sure. So collaboration, we are firm believers in collaboration and in really integrative care for people. We recognize that Like it's not all on one person. It's not all on one practitioner to solve somebody's problems or to help them solve their problems, right? And you don't have to have all of the skills necessary in order to solve everyone's problems, right? That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And so we do a lot of cross referrals. Most of our clients are in talk therapy and yoga therapy at the same time. And because yoga therapy works on the physiology, stuff can start to come up mental health wise, right? And people want to talk about it, but we don't do talk therapy as yoga therapists. We can kind of frame things through the lens of yoga philosophy, frame experiences through the lens of yoga philosophy. But, if somebody really wants to get into the nitty gritty of, an experience that they had and really understanding it, that's not our role. And so we basically tell them, hey, this is really interesting, but, bring this up with your talk therapist this week. Maybe you talk about that with them if you feel like this is something you want to investigate. So the cross referral process and like being part of a team of care is one way that we collaborate. And likewise, we do get a lot of referrals from talk therapists who recognize that, again, that physiological implication to mental health, that mind-body connection and body-mind connection. And either they don't have the time or the skill set to really work with somebody on a physiological level in the way that a yoga therapist can. So while, yes, being able to integrate some of these techniques into talk therapy is super useful and super helpful, right? Being able to teach some breathing practices or being able to guide people through some somatic work is super important. Within the talk therapy, like insurance reimbursement kind of world, right? You have a limited amount of time available. You have what, 50 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes. And can be a lot to get done in that time. And so for those clients who need more input, who need more guidance, who need more help with the physiological aspects of mental health, then, we do get those referrals from talk therapists as well.
Mostly out of curiosity, but I guess this also speaks to accessibility. Sorry, Marissa, I'm just popping off. Are you guys billable by insurance? Can yoga therapy be covered by insurance?
No, so there's no code for yoga therapy. There is actually no, I forget what is the number, the NPH number. There's no number for that. Insurance is a little behind, I think. And I know insurance reimbursement is not a perfect world, that's for sure. But in terms of accessibility, it definitely improves access to yoga therapy. But we do provide sliding scale for people. It is private pay. We do provide sliding scale, and we also work with the Office of Victim Services Victim Compensation Program. They cover yoga therapy for victims of crime as long as it's recommended by a talk therapist. And we also partner, like some people get like fitness reimbursement through their health insurance, and so they're able to use those funds for it. But honestly, accessibility is very important to us. And that's one reason why we are doing these trainings and helping clinicians integrate these techniques into their work, because a lot of them are able to access populations that we cannot. A lot of people can't afford private pay, and we understand that. But that doesn't mean that they should be excluded from having some of these tools and some of these techniques.
Do you often see people start in yoga therapy and then branch out to broadening their care team that way? Or is it usually like my talk therapist suggested I try yoga and here I am?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the person. I would say the majority of clients that we get, especially when there's trauma, are referred to us by a talk therapist, or they are already working with a talk therapist. And often they say like, oh, I've been in talk therapy for a while, or I'm feeling really stuck in talk therapy and I'm just looking for something different, or my therapist recommended this, right? They said that I might need, some more somatic work, or nervous system work. So it's often that route. But that being said, we do get some people who are looking for yoga for mental health, or they're looking for yoga for trauma, and they find us that way. And usually, it depends on the person, but we often kind of ask people to have a talk therapist, or at least some sort of resource that they can talk to, just because that's not, we don't do that. We don't do that work. And when there's mental health stuff involved, and if somebody's coming to us and it's clear that, they do want to talk about stuff, that's when we'll refer out.
And that does show too how important it is for clinicians to know of other options and other treatments and things like that so they can bring them up to whoever they're working with.
Right, exactly.
Well, hopefully insurance does catch up eventually because it seems so much like it mirrors similar principles that are covered by insurance,
Yeah.
but also billing to insurance is nightmarish, so I don't wish that upon you.
Right. I know it's definitely not a perfect world. And I do know of a lot of like PTs and a lot of talk therapists who are going private pay because it's been such a crazy reimbursement landscape. I will say one of my dreams is to get us onto Husky or to Medicaid, like getting us, able to be reimbursed for. So if anybody out there has any connections, I think it's a long road, but that would be amazing if we could accept Husky.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. And so we get kind of the behind the scenes inside scoop of what not only what your training is like, but kind of your process and what you do every day.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Marissa and Alana.
Our nosiness has paid off again. I think sometimes we kind of started this because Marissa and I were just like, I want to ask people questions and learn stuff. But
yeah, I'm just like generally curious. Can you tell me what it is you do?
Yeah, I think that's great. It was great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Links will be in the description to sign up for Yoga for Depression on September 26th and to learn more about Yoga Therapy Associates. Check out our links below to keep up with us at the Connecticut Women's Consortium. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.